Good morning. First, two pieces of news, good and bad. The good news is that, unlike its predecessor, W210, the W211 E-Class no longer requires painting every year, like a fence. Although production started in 2002, it is still possible to find examples without a trace of rust. But here comes the bad news. Just because you can find nice examples doesn't mean that everyone will be. Although some of the W211's bodywork is made of aluminum, the car still has problems with rust on steel parts. The consolation is that these problems are usually not as severe as in its predecessor. The main reasons for this state of affairs are usually given as two. The first is insufficient anti-corrosion protection, and the second concerns the paint. At the beginning of production of the Mercedes W211, the manufacturer was still experimenting with ecological water-based paints. As a result, the corrosion resistance of models from 2002 to 2004 was reduced. Rust most often attacks the sills and areas around the decorative strips on the doors, as well as the boot lid and the edges of the rear fenders. The situation is not improved by the fact that there are of course many post-accident cars on the market, often sloppily repaired. Unfortunately, the car also has its share of problems with its electrical and electronic systems. The Sensotronic Brake Control (SBC), an electro-hydraulic braking system, has become particularly notorious. More on that in the section below. The E-Class of this generation suffers from a relatively large number of minor, albeit annoying problems. Keys and ignitions are damaged, usually without prior symptoms. The electric folding system of the side mirrors, the multimedia system. The air conditioning system is also not trouble-free, which is due to faults in the software controlling the air conditioning. Many people complain about faults in the xenon headlights. Often, the cause of many such faults is given as a poorly protected electrical system against moisture. It is also worth remembering that pre-facelift cars and some post-facelift have two batteries. If the onboard electronics have problems with stable operation, sometimes it is simply the smaller battery that is not charging. The Mercedes E-Class W211 with a sedan bodywork left the factory with a standard multi-link suspension at the front and rear. Compared to the W210, the material was changed from steel to aluminum, which in the opinion of some services was reflected in the lower durability of the newer model suspension. It is the wishbones, or at least their bushings, that often require replacement. However, it is still not bad compared to the competition. There are cases when the E-Class is able to travel about 300,000 kilometers without serious interference with the suspension. This is how much the shock absorbers can withstand. However, one should not count on the exceptionally long durability of the steering rod ends. These are some of the fastest wearing elements of the W211 chassis, which is confirmed, among others, by the GTU reliability ranking. It should be noted that all station wagon cars were equipped with self-leveling rear suspension as standard. It is advisable to carefully check its condition. The petrol V8 models, in both body versions, except for the E55 AMG, came standard with the Airmatic pneumatic suspension. In weaker versions, and in the E55, it was optional. Unfortunately, this system is very similar to the unreliable Airmatic from the W220 S-Class. The most prone to failure elements of this suspension are the shock absorbers/bellows, the compressor and sensors controlling the system's operation. I mentioned the SBC braking system earlier. It has an electronically controlled brake pump. The main problem is pump failures, although there is also a more prosaic problem. The system is programmed for a specific number of braking. If the user exceeds it, ignoring the warnings about approaching the limit, the brakes lock up and the car cannot be driven, even if the system itself is still theoretically functional. SBC, despite its advantages, turned out to be too problematic and unreliable, so it was abandoned during the 2006 facelift. After years, it is true that there are already possibilities to regenerate pumps and other elements of the W211 electro-hydraulic braking system, but SBC is still one of the main reasons why post-facelift cars are recommended. Another thing is that it is now much cheaper than it used to be, and SBC irritates mainly with the inevitability of repair, not its price. It is worth bearing in mind that SBC makes even the simple replacement of brake pads much more difficult. This requires a star diagnosis diagnostic computer, which allows the brake pistons to be retracted in the calipers. A COT. Mercedes offered a wide range of engines in the W211, both petrol and diesel. The weakest petrol engine was a 1.8-liter unit with a mechanical compressor, which offered a very good 163 or 184 HP depending on the year. This engine was available throughout the production period of this generation of the E-Class and was also the only four-cylinder petrol engine in the range, except that the NGT version adapted to burn natural gas was also offered. The rest of the range included V6 engines of various capacities and power, from 177 to 292 HP, while the crowning glory of the range were V8s. The weakest of them are the naturally aspirated 5.0 and 5.5 engines in the E500 model, 306-388 HP, but apart from them, there were also the E55 AMG versions, before the facelift, 5.4, with a mechanical compressor, 476 HP, and the E63 AMG, after the facelift, naturally aspirated 6.2, 514 HP. The basic 1.8K engines are considered relatively problem-free, although they do occasionally have problems with mechanical compressors. Fortunately, the availability of compressor repair and regeneration services has improved in recent years. The cheapest way to buy a used compressor is to play the lottery. In addition, the 1.8 E-Class engines also have problems with timing chains. This is a common feature with some V6 engines, with the 3.5-volt 6 in particular. In addition to timing problems, it also scares users with the risk of damaging the balance shafts and timing gears. Other problems include misfiring, which is reported by owners of various engine versions, although on discussion forums most of this type of issue concerns the 1.8K and 5.0 volts 8 engines. The condition of the oil and coolant should also be monitored. Leaks and other problems related to the lubrication and cooling systems occasionally occur in most engines. However, supporters of gas installations should be pleased. Most engines can be gasified without any major problems, the exception being the E350 CGI model with direct fuel injection offered after the facelift. Here, only LPG injection is possible. Here too, the range of available engines was very wide. The weakest diesel units in the E-Class have a capacity of just over 2.1 L, exactly 2,148 cc, often marked as 2.2, and power from 122 to 170 HP. For a short time, a version with only 102 HP was also offered, but only in the W211 in the factory taxi version. In addition, there are engines in the R5 and R6 layout, both only before the facelift, V6 and even V8. In general, diesel engines in the E-Class have a better reputation than petrol units. The 5-cylinder variant is especially recommended, E270 CDI. The problem is that if we want to avoid the mentioned electro-hydraulic braking system, then we will inevitably avoid this diesel, as well as the also recommended 3.2 R6. In such a case, it is worth betting on the basic 2.1 engine, E200 CDI, E220 CDI. Of course, no engine is completely flawless, so you can expect problems with common rail pumps, mainly 2.1, turbochargers in various engines, or the injection system. It is worth bearing in mind that, depending on the version and year, CDI engines had electromagnetic or piezoelectric injectors. It should be emphasized that none of the E-Class diesel engines is a clearly bad choice. High maintenance costs in many cases do not result from excessive failure rates, but simply from the general wear and tear of the drive unit. It is unreasonable to expect that a more than 10-year-old diesel from the upper class will have a real mileage of 150 or 200,000 kilometers. We wrote in detail about the 3.0 V6 CDI OM 642 here. The Mercedes E-Class W211 was offered with a total of 3 gearboxes, a 6-speed manual and a 5 or 7-speed automatic, the latter found in cars manufactured in 2004 and newer. Problems with mechanical transmissions are basically unheard of. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about automatics. Basically, the more powerful the engine, the greater the risk of automatic transmission failure. Owners of 8-cylinder diesels, E400 CDI, E420 CDI, are sometimes forced to have the transmission repaired every 50-60,000 kilometers. In these cases, the problems are mainly caused by the converter, but failures of solenoid valves and lockup clutches are not uncommon. emergency transmission control can also get on the nerves of the car owner. The Mercedes W211 could be rear-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, except for the AMG versions and the basic diesels. 4x4 was not available there. In models with four-wheel drive, called 4MATIC, it is necessary to remember to change the oil in the transfer case regularly. Considering the age of the cars, if you want to buy it, it is worth considering whether you really need such a drive. The list of recurring faults is not terribly long. The bigger problem is the cost. The Mercedes E-Class is simply an expensive car to maintain, as befits a car of the upper class. This is a completely different price level than in the middle class. If we are talking about basic models with modest equipment, then it is half the trouble. But owners of versions such as the E420 CDI with airmatic suspension should basically be believers. They must deeply believe that this is not the day when something will break down. Nevertheless, the W211 E-Class remains an interesting choice for those looking for an elegant and comfortable car. Although it was not until the W212 that Mercedes achieved the level of durability that users expected, well-maintained W211s can still provide a lot of joy from use. The key is to find one, and that will certainly take time. So there is no particular reason to worry, and the most important thing is not to plan a purchase of the type, "I'll find something this week." And if you know of any common errors, your comments are welcome.
Car.me Website ist Katalog aller Automarken, Motoren, Getriebe. Was bricht und bei welchem Kilometerstand? Welche Pakete können Ihre Tasche hart belasten? Dieses und vieles mehr über Autos erfahren Sie auf Car.me.